The cake was still smoking when she said it. Chocolate ganache, gold-dusted strawberries on top. $24 at a pretentious little bakery that uses the word artisan way too often. I had just finished singing, alone, by the way, because she didn't want to make a big deal about turning 35. And then, as I was cutting her a slice with shaking hands, because I'd had exactly 3 beers and half a Xanax, she leaned back in her chair, exhaled, and said it like she was ordering takeout. "Now leave." I blinked. "Leave what?" "The apartment," she said, licking icing off her finger. "Leave me. Just go?" The way she said it, casual, quiet, like asking me to take the trash out. Only instead of trash, it was me. And I wish I could tell you I laughed it off. I wish I could say I flipped the table, or threw the cake at the wall, or even just asked her why. But I didn't. I froze. I stood there holding a knife covered in frosting, staring at the woman I'd shared 8 Thanksgivings with, who once cried over a dead sparrow on our balcony, now asking me to exit her life like a bad party guest. No explanation. No tears. Just, now leave. So I did. I grabbed my coat, keys, and the slice of cake I'd already plated, because somewhere in my brain, even in emotional freefall, I thought, don't waste food. And the worst part? She didn't try to stop me. She didn't follow. She didn't call that night. Or the next day. Or the next week. It was like I never existed. Except I did. I existed so hard. I remembered the exact day we moved in together. The date she first said she loved me. The number of tiles on our kitchen backsplash. She was the kind of woman who used words like threshold and mood board. And now she was telling me to get out like I was a piece of old furniture she'd outgrown. But it gets worse. So much worse. Because the thing is, I left the apartment that night, but I didn't leave her life. Not right away. No. I came back. Not physically. Not like banging on her door, holding roses in the rain. I'm not a movie character. But I came back in other ways. In digital ways. Because I still had access to our shared iCloud. And you won't believe what I found in her notes app. 3 days after she told me to leave, I was sitting on a park bench eating the leftover birthday cake with a plastic fork. I hadn't gone to work. I hadn't told anyone what happened. My phone was on silent, not that anyone was calling. I was just floating. You know that numb feeling where your hands move, but your brain doesn't? That was me. A guy eating cake out of spite in front of a duck pond. And that's when I remembered the iCloud. See, Ren and I had shared everything. Photos, calendars, shopping lists. Even that stupid meditation app she swore would fix my cortisol levels. Her phone was still backed up to our shared cloud, and in my dazed, pathetic state, I remembered that notes synced automatically. I wasn't proud, but curiosity doesn't care about dignity. So I logged in. At first, it was what you'd expect. Grocery lists, half-written poetry, reminders to call her sister. But then I found a folder named simply, Later. Inside were 17 notes, each titled with a date. The first one was from 5 months ago. May 14th. He didn't notice I changed the sheets. He never notices the details. I'm slowly disappearing from him, and he doesn't even blink. Maybe I need to disappear for real. I kept scrolling. My fingers were ice cold, but I couldn't stop. Each note was like a breadcrumb from the version of her I never met. Each one chipped away at the story I thought we were living. She wrote about how I breathed too loud in the mornings. How my jokes made her stomach turn instead of laugh. She wrote about how she felt guilty that she didn't love me anymore. And worse, how the guilt was fading too. And then came the entry that made my hands go numb completely. July 2nd, I kissed someone else. It felt like breathing for the first time in years. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't an accident either. The second it happened, I thought about Harvey. Not in a regretful way. More like, good. Let him feel this someday. That was the moment I knew it was over. Not the kiss, but the wish. That buried hope that I would feel the same kind of hollow ache she'd been carrying around. She wanted me to suffer for not noticing her fall out of love. But the most disturbing note wasn't about me at all. It was a checklist, dated 2 weeks before her birthday. To do before birthday. Book hair appointment. Order new red dress. Pick up key from Elias. Move that to storage. Tell Harvey it's time. Tell Harvey it's time? Time for what? Time to leave. Time for me to disappear. I sat there staring at that screen, wind cutting across my face, cake melting in its container. Elias. A name I didn't recognize. A key to what? Storage? A second apartment? Another man's place? My stomach turned. I wanted to throw the cake into the lake and scream, but all I did was stare. I had been erased with the quiet efficiency of someone closing a browser tab. I wasn't even a character in her new life, just something to uninstall. I started checking everything after that. Her photos, her location history, her synced messages from iMessage. Thank God she never turned off that feature. That's when I saw the contact. Hidden under the name Clarissa Pilates. She never took Pilates. I opened the thread, and that's when the reality broke open. Because the man she was messaging wasn't Elias. It was someone else entirely. Someone who called her W and referred to me as the leash. Soon you'll be free. You've done enough pretending. Time to cut him loose. You said you would by your birthday. I've held up my end. I want what we talked about. What had they talked about? And more importantly, what the hell did he mean by held up his end? I shouldn't have, but I clicked the location pin he'd sent her in a message. It was an address. In a part of town we never went to. A warehouse district. He sent her that pin 1 hour before she told me to leave. Which means, she hadn't just asked me to disappear. She had scheduled it. I didn't go straight there. I stared at that address for a full day, letting it rot in the back of my brain while I pretended I wasn't going insane. I did stupid things instead. Organized my socks, watched 4 hours of aquarium videos, even vacuumed the inside of my car. Anything to avoid the obvious truth. She had been planning something with him, and that address, it wasn't random. But curiosity doesn't die easy. It festers. By the next night, I was parked 3 blocks away from that warehouse with the engine off, my fingers tapping the steering wheel like a metronome for my anxiety. The street was dead quiet. No businesses open. Just broken windows, flickering streetlights, and the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I walked up to the building. No signs, no logos. Just a wide gray metal door with scratches near the handle and a keypad on the side. I stood there like an idiot, hoping something would happen. A light, a voice, a sign telling me to go home and forget all this. But instead, the door clicked open. Not all the way, just a little. Enough to let someone slip through. Like it had been unlocked from the inside. I don't know what came over me, but I stepped in. It smelled like sawdust and paint thinner. Dim hanging lights cast long, shadowy lines across the concrete floor. There were no people. No voices. Just objects. Furniture mostly. Covered in sheets. Some shelves. A desk with nothing on it except a Polaroid camera and a stack of blank sticky notes. Then I saw it. A mirror leaning against the far wall, half covered. And taped to it was a photo of me. Me. Sitting on our old couch, drinking coffee. A candid, taken from behind, slightly above. Like someone had stood in the hallway and quietly snapped it. In red ink underneath the photo, someone had written, "This one fades easy." I didn't understand what that meant. I still don't. But I took the photo. And I ran. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the photo. Not the image itself, but the handwriting. That smug, lazy curve of the word fades. Like whoever wrote it thought I'd already been erased. I sat on the floor of the motel room I'd been hiding out in. The kind of place where the Wi-Fi never works and the TV remote is always sticky, and stared at that single Polaroid under the lamplight for hours. I wasn't scared yet. Not really. It was too weird to be scary. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt worse. It felt like evidence of what I didn't know. But someone had been watching me, photographing me, storing images of my life in a forgotten building. And Rin knew. The next day, I went back. I told myself not to, but that warehouse pulled at me like a loose tooth. You don't want to poke it, but your tongue keeps going back anyway. This time I came during the day, just after noon. The door wasn't cracked open like before. I knocked. No answer. Waited. Still nothing. So I did something desperate. I typed in 4 digits. Ren's birthday. Click. The door unlocked. Inside, the light was worse. Natural sunlight leaked through some broken skylight above, throwing long diagonal shadows that made everything look off. The furniture was still there, still covered, but this time I looked under the sheets. The first one was an armchair. Faded green leather, identical to the one Ren had insisted we sell last spring because it reminded her of someone else. I thought she meant an ex. Turns out, she meant me. Because next to the chair was a filing cabinet. And inside the filing cabinet were more Polaroids. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Every photo showed the same person me. Different angles. Different times of day. Some were from years ago. Me mowing the lawn. Me tying my shoe at the bus stop. Me paying for groceries. Me standing in line at a movie theater I barely remembered going to. They were labeled, each one, in the same red ink. For later. Still unaware. Almost gone. And one that just said, no one will notice. There was nothing of her. Not one photo of Ren. Not a single image that proved she'd ever been there. It was like this entire place, this twisted archive, had only ever been about me. Watching me. Storing pieces of me like I was some kind of fading artifact. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a breakup. This was a removal. A process. She hadn't left me because she fell out of love. She'd been working toward this. Whatever this was. And I still didn't know who Elias was. But I was starting to think he wasn't just a rebound. I think he was the one behind the camera. I didn't hear him come in. That's the worst part. I was still in the warehouse, standing over the open filing cabinet like an idiot, holding my own face in my hands, printed out 100 times in slightly different angles like I was some kind of museum exhibit curated by a lunatic. I was flipping through another stack of Polaroids when I felt it. Not a sound. A shift. The air behind me changed, like the room had inhaled. I turned around too fast, knocking one of the drawers shut with my hip. No one. Nothing but shadows and dust, and the open door I'd left behind me. And then I saw it. In the mirror, the one that had the photo taped to it before, there was a shape. Not mine. I was facing it. The reflection should have been mine. But it wasn't. It was a man. Taller than me. Broad shoulders. Standing perfectly still, behind me. Only, when I turned around, there was no one there. The mirror showed one thing. Reality showed another. I didn't have time to figure it out. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked down and felt my heart freeze. One message. No contact name. Just a number I didn't recognize. It read, "Stop looking." Then, 5 seconds later, "You weren't supposed to find this." I backed away from the filing cabinet, every inch of me buzzing with heat and nausea. I was being watched again, not in the past, not in photos. Right now, I could feel it. That's when I remembered the name. Elias. I hadn't heard that name before the checklist in her notes. And yet, ever since I saw it, it felt familiar. Not in the obvious way. Not like, oh, he was at our wedding, or that's the barista from the cafe. More like a shadow you've seen in the corner of your eye so many times you start to think it's furniture. I left the warehouse, fast, taking one photo with me. A random one, me sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons. I have no memory of that moment. Back at the motel, I started searching. Elias. Nothing came up in my contacts. Not in Ren's social media, either. The accounts were all gone now. Wiped clean. Like she never existed. But I did find something strange in my own inbox. A spam folder I hadn't checked in months. One email, 6 weeks old. Subject line. You've been chosen for deletion. Let go. It came from an address I didn't recognize, Elias. Clean space at Proton Mail. Calm. No message body. No links. Just that single sentence. Deletion. I didn't know if it was a joke. A scam. Some weird cult thing. But it hit me in the chest like a warning written in code I wasn't meant to read. And now here's where it gets worse. Because that night, I tried to call my mom. She didn't answer. I texted my brother. The message didn't deliver. I checked Facebook. My profile was gone. Not deactivated. Gone. As if I'd never been there. And I realized something that made my mouth go dry. They weren't just erasing the relationship. They were erasing me. I didn't sleep again. It wasn't just the warehouse or the photos or the man in the mirror. It was everything folding in at once. My phone, my name, my online existence, all of it flickering like a dying light bulb. It felt like I was slipping through cracks in my own life, and no one was around to notice. By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know who, or what, was behind the Elias email. I bought a burner phone at a gas station just outside town, registered it with a fake name, not that it mattered now. Even my real name felt fake, and called the number attached to that original message. It rang once. Clicked. Then silence. No greeting. No whole music. Just a faint sound, like wind passing through a tunnel. I waited. I almost hung up. But then a voice came on the line. Male, low, worn out, like someone who hadn't spoken in weeks. You're not the first one who's called, he said. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I know what you're about to ask, he continued. And I can't give you what you're looking for. I finally found my voice. Who is Elias? A pause. Then, something that sounded like a laugh. Dry, bitter. There is no Elias, the man said. Not really. He's a pattern, a job title, a process. Sometimes he's a man, sometimes a woman. Sometimes he's a folder on your desktop. He's whatever version you're most likely to ignore until it's too late. My skin crawled. Why me? You weren't supposed to be paying attention, the voice said. That's why they picked you. You lived life half awake. Just enough to function, not enough to resist. You didn't see her checking out. You didn't see the text messages. You let it all slide. I was trying, I whispered. So was she, he replied. Until she stopped. Something about his voice shifted, from cold to apologetic. She didn't do this to hurt you. She did it to complete something. That's how they work. One leaves. The other dissolves. If done properly, there's no mess. Just absence. I gripped the phone tighter. How do I stop it? You don't. The line went dead. I stood there in the gas station parking lot, staring out at the passing cars like they might hold a clue. For the first time, I felt something heavier than fear, a kind of numb grief. Like I was attending my own funeral in slow motion, but no one had sent out invites. I went back to the motel and looked in the mirror above the bathroom sink. For a moment, I swore I saw it again. That second reflection, flickering behind me like a bad signal. It didn't move. It didn't blink. Just watched. When I turned around, the room was empty. But on the floor, under the door, someone had slid a note. Handwritten. No envelope. All it said was, "She's almost done letting go. Are you?" I didn't knock right away. I stood on the other side of her door for 10, maybe 15 minutes, just breathing like a man preparing to break into his own past. It felt surreal even being there. Outside the apartment we used to share, keys still in my pocket, name still on the lease. But now it looked different, brighter, like something had been scrubbed clean, and not in a good way. Like a crime scene trying too hard to smile. I finally knocked. 3 times, then once more, because I couldn't help myself. Some part of me still thought maybe this was all in my head. That she'd opened the door, looked tired and sorry, and asked me where I'd been. But that's not what happened. She opened the door halfway, leaned into the frame, and looked at me like I was a Jehovah's Witness with a clipboard. Yes? She asked. I blinked. Ren, it's me. A pause. Her head tilted slightly, not confused, calculating. I'm sorry, she said slowly. Do I know you? She wasn't joking. There was no smirk, no dramatic reveal, no twist waiting in her throat. Just a calm, distant face staring at mine like I was some neighbor she'd never bothered to meet. I tried to laugh, but it came out dry. Okay, you're mad. I get it. You want space. But come on, Ren, this isn't funny. She narrowed her eyes. I think you have the wrong person. Then she started to close the door. I caught it with my hand. Not hard, just enough to stop it. You left me, I said. You told me to disappear. I did. I found the warehouse. The photos. Elias. All of it. I know what you're doing. Her expression didn't change, but she stopped pushing. After a long moment, she said something I wasn't ready for. I'm not Ren. My hand dropped. I think you're unwell, she said gently. You should talk to someone. She shut the door. I didn't move. I just stood there, heartbeat in my ears, trying to do the math. Same face. Same voice. The tattoo on her wrist, the one we got together, it was gone. Her eyes weren't the same color. And the apartment behind her? It wasn't ours. The layout had changed. The walls were painted differently. The windows were covered in fabric I'd never seen before. I walked down the hall, heart hollow, and called the number again, the one from the email. This time, it went straight to voicemail. But the recording was different. It was her voice. Ren's voice. If you're hearing this, it said, then you've already followed too far. Let go before it finishes. Some people weren't meant to remember. Then the line cut out. I don't know who answered that door. I don't know if it was her, changed somehow, or someone pretending to be her. Maybe she's gone. Maybe they rebuilt her, like they're trying to delete and rebuild me. But that night, I got one last message. No sender. Just a text bubble that appeared while I stared at my phone screen in the dark. You're next. The message, you're next, stayed on my screen all night. I didn't sleep. I just lay there in the motel bed, waiting for someone to knock on the door. No one came. By sunrise, the message had vanished. Not deleted. Vanished. Like it had never been there. Just like everything else. But something was different when I woke up. It wasn't dramatic. Just small things. My name was back in my phone settings. My browser history wasn't wiped. My reflection looked like me again, not faded, not doubled, just me. And the biggest change? I felt still. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was sliding off the edges of the world. I drove back to the apartment building. Hers, or whoever she was. I didn't knock this time. I just sat on the bench across the street and watched the window. She opened it around 9 a.m. to water a plant. I looked at her, really looked, and I realized something that broke my brain and fixed it all at once. It wasn't her. Not in a sci-fi way. Not a clone or a mask or some government shadow program. Just someone else. A person who looked like her, maybe even rented the same place, but wasn't Ren. I'd spent weeks chasing something that had already ended. Ren was gone long before she told me to disappear. What I was haunted by wasn't her. It was the space she left behind. And for the first time, I was ready to let it stay empty. I left the bench and walked. No destination, just movement. I turned off my phone, got a coffee, talked to the barista like a normal person. I even smiled, and it felt real. Later that afternoon, I found a little bookstore tucked between two apartment buildings. I went in, and there was a dog sleeping by the register. The woman behind the counter didn't look like Ren. She didn't look like anyone I knew. She offered me tea and asked if I was looking for anything in particular. I told her no, but then I paused and said, actually, maybe something about starting over. She smiled like she'd heard that before and handed me a paperback with no title on the cover. Just a gray circle. Sometimes, she said, you don't need to understand the story you were in to start a better one. I don't know what happened in that warehouse. I don't know if Elias was real or if I just unraveled after years of ignoring the signs. But I know I survived it. And I know who I am again. My name is Harvey. I was forgotten. But I'm still here. And for the first time in a long time, I'm ready to be remembered by myself.